Hi everyone, this is Howard. Welcome to another Star Talk Tuesday. This is actually a really special Tuesday. On August 11th, if you're not overly familiar, this is the peak of the annual Perseid Meteor Shower. Just a quick rundown. The Perseid Meteor Shower is the debris field, the results of the debris field left behind from the passage of a comet, Swift-Tuttle. It's a comet, I believe it has about a 130-year orbit. And on a previous pass, it had expelled an enormous amount of material, and that debris field is kind of left in space, and the Earth just kind of plows through it every year like your car moving through a cloud of love bugs, and those little particles crash into the upper atmosphere of the Earth in excess of 100,000 miles an hour, and they just sort of vaporize. And those little streaks of light that we see, of course, meteors every day. The Earth is constantly moving through the debris of the solar system, but in particular, there's concentrations of material that are the result of this comet, and that's what we call the Perseid Meteor Shower. And that peaks tonight. Now, it actually spans from about mid-July to about mid-August. But on August 11th to the morning of August 12th is the night that we see the greatest amount, and that amount is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 60 to 100. And that's pretty good. But this is the year we have the last quarter moon up there. Now, in previous years, we've had very bright moons, almost full moons up there, and they just pretty much wreck the show. But with the last quarter moon, it is, in a sort of a visual sense, not overly offensive in its brightness. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and send our time forward. And of course, I want to also add, as we're doing this slowly, of course, is that we got a spectacular representation of Jupiter this week. So I don't want to make it just all about the Perseids, because Jupiter is also got some pretty thunderous presence this week. So I always like to get to the start. There we go. Just as those first stars pop up. Okay, as we look to the south, of course, Jupiter and Saturn are going to dominate the sky for the next few months. They were just recently at opposition, meaning as the seesaw goes down, meaning as the sun sets, Jupiter and Saturn were just recently rising, and the Earth has moved in a position subsequently now that they're rising a little bit earlier, or rather they were already up high, and they will be up in the sky rising a little bit earlier and earlier, and then pretty soon as the evenings wear on through the season, Jupiter and Saturn will be in the western sky as the sun goes down. Of course, then Mars will dominate the sky. What we want to do is shift our view over here to the northeast. And we want to do this, we want to talk about the Perseid Meteor Shower. So I'm going to do this in a proper way. I'm going to pull the view out. We're going to get more of what I'm trying to simulate here is a blanket view, meaning you're laying down in the grass and you get a pretty large view of the sky. I'm trying to get that just right about there. Now, we're going to make it later because the Perseids are going to be peaked somewhere after midnight. Now, the reason for this, of course, is as you consider this, the Earth is moving around the sun. And as the Earth moves around the sun, the daytime side, of course, the side facing the sun, and the nighttime side opposite it, as the Earth moves, the direction of its motion is sort of, if you think of it as the front of the car, the very front of the car, the center of the front of the car would be somewhere on the terminator in a vague general sense. It's not always the case because of the tilt of the Earth, but somewhere in that demarcation between daytime and nighttime. And as a result of this is why, as the Earth moves through space, the direction of motion is best seen, or the meteors are peaking at, between midnight and noon. Now, half of that time, of course, is in daytime, at least almost half, more than half of it, is when the sun is up, so you clearly can't see those. And usually, and this is why they say this, it's always best a little bit before dawn, because you're maximizing the darkness while you're also maximizing the amount of stuff that the Earth will be passing via the direction of the Earth's motion. So We'll go ahead and kick this off into a point where we start to see where the Perseids are. There's Cassiopeia up there, this familiar precursor to that. The M, there's the Perseids trailing behind. And this is what we call the radiant. We, like the secret community of people. Curious people will know this. This is the radiant where the meteor shower will appear to radiate from. So let's get that to, ooh, that's close to 4 o'clock in the morning. This is actually ideal. So as I was saying, this is sort of the center of a spoked wheel, if you want to imagine it that way. That's the hub. So you can imagine spokes going off in different directions. So as you look, this is why we took this wide field view. Let me get this out here really quickly. In order to enjoy the Perseids, you do not need a pair of binoculars. You do not need a telescope. In fact, I recommend you put those things away. Specifically to enjoy meteor showers, the best thing to have is a hammock or a recliner or a blanket in the grass and some mosquito repellent, because you want to have as wide a field of view as possible. And by laying down somewhere where there aren't too many obstructions against the sky and certainly on the horizon, you maximize your chances of seeing one of these meteors. Now, I'm going to kick this up just a little bit, or break this up here. There we go. Exceptional Leonid rate. There we go. So what we'll see, we should see some streaks here. In any case, as the Earth moves through this debris field, we start to see streaks in the sky. Now that's not to say that we're starting to see them. You're not going to see meteors that have nothing to do with the Perseids. The Earth is always flying through dusty debris in the solar system. But there's a preponderance of stuff in the sky that's a result of this debris field left behind by this comet. And so on this evening, between, I'd say right around now, about quarter to 4 in the morning to right before sunrise is going to be when you're going to see the most of them. And by laying down, you'll see them scattered across the sky. And if you can imagine seeing one over here, and if you were able to trace its origin back to what would look in the general direction of the hub or where the radiant is, then you'll know you're looking at a Perseid, one of the Perseids. Now, if we're lucky again, and you can clearly see there's a moon up there that's going to be challenging this, so you'll see nothing but the brightest at this point. With the moon up there in the sky, kind of highlight that. But it's fairly bright enough that I think that you'll still be able to see a significant number of Perseids. Now, typically on a really good night, you'll see between 60 and 100. I think that might be a little bit challenged with the presence of the quarter moon. Now, we're going to go ahead, and this is August 12th, and we want to change the date and time, because we're going to want to look at it on the evening of August 14th, which is Friday. And let's change the time here. I'm going to go backward in time first. Here we go. Let's take that to right around 10:30 in the evening. Give it about a minute or two. There we go. And we're going to change this to August 14th. And I'm going to drop down those meteors because now they're going to become a distraction. If only they look like that all the time. Okay, so we're going to adjust our view to the south. And there's Jupiter. So we're 10:30, just shy of 10:30 in the evening on August 14th. Now we're going to lock onto Jupiter for this, so here we go. As we bring this in, this is what I meant by Jupiter's going to have a thunderous presence this week, and in particular this evening. You can see there's a gaggle of moons there. A lot of stuff going on around Jupiter. There's Ganymede right there. It's hard to see it. Kind of lost. And with a telescope, or with a low power view anyway, it might be very difficult to get a sense of Ganymede's presence there because its glow, if you will, its presence, its visual presence is kind of lost in the sea of light that is Jupiter. But it is possible to see that with a telescope, but that's not necessarily exactly what I want you to see. So we bring this up a little bit closer. There's Ganymede, and here, look, you look way over here, just crossing the limb of Jupiter on the other side. That's Ganymede's shadow. This is what we call a shadow transit. Now, this is not rare. The moons of Jupiter, there's a lot of them. Jupiter has 69 moons, but there are 4 of them that were visible to Galileo 400 years ago in his old-fashioned, his very crude, what would be a very, very, very narrow field of view, perhaps somewhere in the neighborhood of a 60 millimeter refractor. and he was able to see the moons of Jupiter, and tracking their motion, it helped validate Copernican principle that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Anyway, the whole point is that these moons going around Jupiter, they do it very rapidly. So basically what you're seeing is the shadow of the moon, and as the moon goes around Jupiter quite frequently, those shadows are frequently seen. So it's not uncommon. So as we add time, you'll see why I use the word thunderous or spectacular. Here we go. There we go. There goes Ganymede. Here comes the great red spot. Here comes Io. And Io's shadow completing the view. Let's bring that up maybe a little bit further. Let's make that a complete right angle triangle. Right about. I'm going to do this painfully slow, I see. Don't dare change it now. I'll probably mess it up. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, so this is in a respectable telescope. And when I say respectable, I mean fairly decent aperture, good weather conditions, and a high power view. Well, you would lose a lot of the subtle detail here, but you could get about a view that would resolve something too akin to this. You'd see the red spot, you'd see the bands, and if weather conditions were favorable, you'd get the subtle hints of disturbances in the bands, but you would definitely be able to see the shadows as well as the presence as Io. I know I can speak from personal experience that I know this can be done. But of course, I happen to live somewhere dark, and that makes, when you're looking up into the sky, that's one of the most valuable things to have. One of the most valuable commodities to have is darkness. So, and weather conditions. So, this is what would be called a rare event, is a double shadow transit. And not just a double shadow transit. We've got the great red spot as well. Now, this is, like I said, I would call this uncommon. It actually does happen probably quite frequently. What makes it rare is that it's not always conducive to observing, meaning sometimes this happens in the daytime, so you can't see them, no one's looking. But in the evening time, sometimes to time with humans, convenience of human observing, it's not always often that you get to see a double shadow transit. What's even rarer is a triple shadow transit, and I think there's only been maybe 2 or 3 in the last 2 decades or so. In any case, to see the double shadow transit is pretty cool. What's kind of funny is that it doesn't fall into our week that we're talking about, of course, but on August 22nd, we'll be talking about it next week. There's another one, but this one is the more spectacular of them. It's because it's got the great red spot joining the double shadow transit. We'll see these two again, Ganymede and Io, doing the same thing, except I think they're going to swap positions, and that will be coming up. So if you miss this opportunity, maybe you'll have another one. Again, it's all about the weather. Take every opportunity that she gives you. Okay, so not to make this all exclusively about the Perseids and Jupiter, because there's so much more, but I think I'm running out of time. So let's try to look at those. Yeah, let's get rid of all those little meteor designators up there. The Milky Way is descending into the view down in the southwestern sky. Of course, Saturn is there. But here, and this is just sort of a sneak preview. We've got Mars coming up there. Of course, you see Uranus is marked on the sky up there, but that's a relatively challenging object. And we'll stick to just simple naked eye visibility here. Mars, of course, you can see this in the sky very easily. And we're soon coming up on the month of October, where Mars will be at opposition, and it will be biggest and brightest that it will be in our sky for quite a few years. So that's the best opportunity to observe Mars, and that's sort of building up. That's sort of the crescendo. And I'll give you another sneak peek. We got another spectacular event coming up between Jupiter and Saturn in the winter months, and that's sort of another drum roll to a spectacular astronomical event coming up. So we're watching a few things happening, slowly culminating into some pretty interesting things in the months coming up. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've run out of time. Thanks again for joining us. We'll catch you next time.